Hey everybody. Wow, what a beautiful, warm, almost real hot day today. Hitting the trail. And yeah, I want to share with you what I've been up to. What have you been up to? Sometimes we need to kind of pause, unplug, do other things, other priorities, and then come back, right? So I hope you're finding a way to find your balance. So I've been looking for a while for a property, and when you start in this process of home shopping and land shopping, you find yourself, at least for me, I found myself in unfamiliar territory. There's so many things I needed to learn that I was clueless about, because it's a new level of education that I've been embarking on and in. So I found this great property that I was really excited about, and it was like a couple blocks from the water. So you would need to have flood insurance, and you need to do things of that sort because of the particular property. And I could look at this property that needed repair, that looked, I'm just going to say, a little tattered, and I could say, I could see myself finding a solution to the problems that are visible to me with this property. And so I came in with all these ideas, but I didn't know how to play the game at that particular property. And I think the real estate agent was trying to scare me, maybe even because he was interested in the property. But nonetheless, it was like I was kind of being persuaded not to even consider, right? And that particular property was in a water path. It had been flooded. It did have some, mold, mildew damage. And I was looking at the fact that the base of it was concrete, and the parts that were concrete you could save, and the parts that, were wood and what is it called? Drywall, you'd have to replace those. But I was hopeful. I had a vision, but I didn't pursue it because I got scared. So then I found a different property, and this one was a farm, and it already had orchards on it, and it already had, the agricultural setting. So like I could have a certain amount of animals, and I got really excited about this property. But then we had all these blizzards and snowstorms, and the day that I was supposed to look at the property, it just kept getting covered in snow, and you couldn't really check the ground level, and it was like, forget it. You got to wait till the end of winter to follow up on this property. And then when I go to look at the property, it's gone, right? Sold. So then I found another property, and this one was just a really, I'm going to say awkward shape. It had benefits, but it was awkward. It had a really narrow driveway that was steep, and with my big van, you got to widen the driveway, and the cost to doing that turned out to be a lot more than I had anticipated. I'm thinking a $10,000 fix, and based on the county regulations, whatever, it's a $50,000 fix. And it's like, then you want to do all the other renovations, then it's like your price becomes, well, do you want to deal with this horrible driveway and fix the other things that are in the house that you want to bring them up to your standard, or do you want to have the comfortable driveway and then deal with the less than par living situation until you handle that, pay off that portion of fix up, and then go round 2 or phase 2. So, and it was technically a 1-bedroom house, which for most people they're not interested in. Doesn't have a very good resale value. The property was kind of weird shaped. So again, even though you could have a farm and, garden and some animals, it's still, was a no-go. So I keep looking, I'm looking at all these properties, and then I flip the pendulum and I start to look at areas that are, maybe more in a city limit, not exactly what I wanted, but if I got that, maybe I could build up equity. Maybe I could have a renter, and maybe that would be a smart way to at least have a property. So I start thinking in those terms. Not really what I wanted, but what was I willing to do in order to get what I really want? Take a stepping stone approach. But again, the properties that I was interested in, and the ones that I go around all this mud here. The ones that I was interested in, a lot of them were a lot more, the taxes were a lot higher because of being, in the city or closer to the city limits, as opposed to being rural. And then, you have to look at all those numbers and say, do I really want to spend, $7,000 a year on taxes? So, property taxes. So the point is, I'm looking at all these variables and I keep looking. And, when you're in the midst of looking, you start to get discouraged. Like, when am I going to find my property? This one sounds great. It's in the rural area where I want it to be. Oh, but, you drive to the property, it looks like it could really be, something that would really work for you. Like, it had a garage and it was saying it was a 4-bedroom house. But when you get to the property, it's, a manufactured home. It's not even a legitimate, real traditional structure. It has water damage. It has mold damage. It's in a flood zone. And really, it's a teardown. But how Zillow or the other, listing real estate agencies can get away with listing something as being a 4-bedroom house that's, quote, move-in ready. And it's like, I don't know about you, but if you walk into a place and it smells like ammonia, it's probably not a good sign, because you're dealing with mold and spores, etc. So keep looking, right? And, I finally, like I said, there's the disappointment. Like, I'd be like, I just need a week off of not even looking. I'm just going to do some more van life travel, short-term trips, and, focus on other, goals that I have. And then, I come back to, okay, let me start looking again. Let me catch up with all my Zillow listings. Let me see what's in the hopper, And, I find this other place, and it was like, sometimes when you look at these listings, you're like, is that even possible? Like, this seems like amazing. But again, in order to find out the details about this property, it's far away. So, you've got to invest the driving time because it's 3 hours away. So I coordinate with my carpenter, electrician, plumber guy, and we drive to go see this property, and we go to an open house, and, we're looking for where are the problems, and some of the problems were being disclosed, by the real estate agent. And some of the other problems were just still a question mark, well, I don't really know the status of that. You'll have to do your research. The house is being sold as is, as is, those words, as is. It's like, the seller's not going to put any money into it. That's what as is means. And they're not going to negotiate in any way to make it easier for you, the buyer. And so you're like, that could be really positive or it could be really negative. But again, the house that was on the property is a non-traditional structure. So even though it looked and appeared great, there were some major problems. And one of them being no electricity on site. So you can't really test the other systems without electricity on site. And even though people make it seem like it's not a big deal, you just restore the electricity. But it was a bigger deal than that. And I spent all this time in the past week, like, calling all of these places in regards to this property to try to get answers. And, you know, it's like in rural towns, like, they have a slower rate to responding. Like, they're not quick and fast like when you're in a bigger city. There's going to be more of a stall time. And so then finally I'm now getting responses from questions that I had a week ago. And you know, it's like I still can't get my answers because there's no electricity on the property, and all these other answers need electricity in order to do the assessments, do the inspections, to be able to give you a legit, here's what's good, here's what's bad, this is what you're going to need to do kind of thing. So, like I said, the carpenter guy and we had a good idea of like what was necessary in terms of like how we see things. And we see things as simple, and it doesn't have to be complicated. But in the real estate and financial real estate world, everything is complicated, and you have to dot every I and cross every T. And there's a lot of, I'm just going to call it legal nonsense. You know, I guess we long for the days, the good old days, with wagon, horse and buggies, going out west, claiming a land, putting down your flag and saying, this is mine, you know, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to put up my borders, and that's the end of it. Like, what happened to that? You know, we live in a much different time that, you know, those variables are not the same as what they used to be. So, so I've been considering this property, and like I said, as soon as I saw it, really liked it, really wanted it, could see beyond solving those problems. I could see a solution for the problems. I could see a vision for what I wanted to do with the property. So I kept moving forward with trying to find answers, kept moving forward with trying to, you know, get financing. And in my idea of what I know about my limited, you know, understanding of real estate financing, I was already pre-qualified. So I'm thinking, hey, I've got this number, and as long as I find a property that's within this number range, then I'm good. And obviously I'm the kind of person that wants to get a lower, you know, started number and have a cushion. So I'm not trying to max myself out. I'm trying to make it a reasonable cost, right? And that's how I was going about this. But I soon found out that this unusual structure on the property did not classify as a normal traditional home. Therefore, the bank won't finance the property and the land. And here's this beautiful land with some, you know, minor things that could be fixed, but because there's no electricity to test these things, it becomes challenging, and the seller wants to sell it as is, and they don't want to make any effort to do anything to change it. So really, I'm like, okay, I can't get regular, traditional, conventional financing for this property and land. So maybe the seller will want to finance with me. So I write a financial offer to the seller a seller offer financing. And, the real estate agent did not say, when I handed her this offer, she didn't say, hey, by the way, we're not all, you can't, this person is not going to offer that. She didn't tell me that. So the whole weekend I'm thinking, I'm good, I'm in the running, I got my offer in, this is good, I'm offering him a good percentage rate. He's going to make more money off of my deal than he would if he put his money in a bank account, right? So I'm thinking, this is a good deal. But I finally get the phone call from the real estate agent, and she says, I need you to reconsider your offer because the seller is not going to be accepting seller financing. And, you have until, Tuesday at noon to get your offer in. And so, it's like, imagine thinking that you've got the financing covered. Like you're not thinking about it anymore. You're focused on trying to solve all the other problems and get all those other things underway. But meanwhile, you're realizing that financing that you thought that you had covered is now not covered. So now it's back to the financial game and trying to get financing and calling all these other lenders and finding out, well, do you do non-traditional, loans? And it's just a maze. Like, mentally it's exhausting. And then I'm like, okay, from a business perspective, can I do it from a business perspective? I didn't even think that was a possibility, but maybe I could approach this, from a business perspective with like real estate for the business. So I start thinking of writing up my offer for that. And I start looking for lenders that will support that. And, then there's such a more pile of paperwork that you have to do on the business side than you do when it's just a residential sale. And then the business side is going to charge you a higher percentage than the residential side for just getting a home loan. So then, you're watching your numbers get higher and higher. And meanwhile, you thought this was going to be such a simple transaction, and it's getting complicated. So I end up, because I called all these different places, some of the places started to call me back and, oh, I got your message, blah, blah. This isn't going to qualify, but if you want, you might want to think about hard money lenders. And I'm like, what's a hard money lender? I never even heard of that term. I don't know. And they're like, well, it's going to be a shorter term, like 5 years or 3 years, and it's going to be a higher percentage rate, but you might be able to get the money, to be able to make the deal, and then you can always refinance later. So again, I start looking into these options, and these options, most of them are digital, and the space that they allow to like put in, like, where do you get your income from or whatever, it's like, it's not very specific, and you have to click down and pick one of these options, but the options of how I earn my money are not listed. And some of these things didn't say self-employment. So I'm like, how am I supposed to justify this? And then there's no place for you to upload your documents to prove this at this point. But then automatically it takes you to, oh no, you're denied, you don't meet the qualifications. But it didn't really allow me to put my income qualifications in the designated drop down menus or whatever. So you're just like, oh. And I'm going through all this and I'm like, okay, who else do I know that might be able to help me or give me some support? And I talked to some of my good friends that are into investing, and they talked to me about, if I could do, find somebody that wanted to do creative financing and get them to put up the money, and that way I would be paying them privately, and then there's no dings on my credit, and it keeps it simple. So then I'm looking into those solutions and making phone calls to people that I know, and I'm leaving a voicemail message on some and like waiting to actually have a conversation with others. So, all of this, it just kind of points to, in my case, I get frustrated that, I've picked wrong men in my life, and the last one was a doozy. And he took me financially for everything that I had saved. And just recuperating out of that is a long-term process, and when is it over? Like, it's like, I'm almost in the clear now. I have like, I don't know, maybe $5,000 left to pay off, and that's from like this ridiculous amount of money that he put in my name. So, it's like there's this process of like bettering yourself, leveling up, getting smarter financially, learning how to, use your resources wisely, learning how to, make better choices and invest in your future instead of just buying stupid stuff that just sits around and it takes up space, but it's not helping your future. So, and then I've been selling things online, assets that I have, etc. Like, just thinking about this from every angle that I can think of. And then all of a sudden, this one, realist, lender says, what about, do you know of anybody that, owns a home and, might be able to get the loan for you and do a home equity loan and against their asset, but you're really paying the bill and you write up a legal contract. And I'm like, wow, like, what a simple idea, but it never crossed my mind to even think of such a thing. And, like, it is the simplest out of all the different scenarios, because I don't have to prove all these things about my self-employment. I don't have to prove all these things about the missing years with the fiance that, ruined my name and, created identity theft and all this other nonsense. Like, I don't, like, none of that applies when somebody else is using their good credit, their good equity, and I'm just going to pay the bill. So that's what I'm considering right now. And I don't even know if it's possible. Like, on this property, I might have missed it, because the number that I put in for the offer, that my bid, had to be in by 12 noon. And at this point, I can't change that number, unless the seller comes back and says, hey, we like, your vision for the property. Would you like to come back with an offer? Unless he asks for that, or, and I could likely already be outbid by 4 other bidders. So it's kind of an uncomfortable position to be in again, because what comes to the bottom line of this whole thing is that cash wins, that the cash offers are going to win, that the people that have money saved, or the people that have used other people's money with equity in their home and then got a cash advance or a cash offer for, that, and then just paid off the property or paid off the house with that money and made a legal agreement with the homeowner. And it's like, I didn't realize that this was even an option. If I would have known it was an option, I would have put that in as an offer, but I didn't find out until after the 12 o'clock deadline. So I don't want to say I'm defeated yet, because I don't know, and I have to keep holding the faith. But I'm also trying to be realistic that there are probably other people that had a higher offer than me. And if that's the case, the whole thing's a moot point, and then perhaps I didn't really win. But I have to wait it out to see if the seller chose my offer. And if he did choose my offer, the offer that I put in for was for seller financing, and I'm not going to be able to do this seller financing because of all the weirdness about the property. Like, the only way I could do it is if I change it entirely to a completely different agreement. So, and I don't know if they'll let me do that. So it's uncomfortable to be in the uncomfortableness, you know, and for a variety of reasons, I could say, you know, renting has had its advantages. You know, I've been able to live in different cities and different towns. I've been able to live in different states. I've had the opportunity to do some travel in my lifetime by not having a home, and being in like a 30-day lease, I could get out of it and, you know, pack up everything and be on my way. And when you live really simply, it's easy to pack up your car and leave and sell off the big pieces of furniture, or, you know, donate them and be done, you know. But then the idea of planting roots, the idea of having a garden, the idea of having animals, the idea of having peace and quiet and your own little slice of real estate, like real land that you can go outside in your own yard, kind of like where I am now. Like this kind of environment would be my home backyard kind of a thing. And again, I look at that as priceless. Like I wouldn't have to drive as far in my van to go anywhere, because I'd be on land that was really beautiful to look at and hang out in. And it has a stream on the property, so you have water access, and there's a walking distance, you know, to a park, and you know, so it's like I really want to win, you know. I really want this to be my home. And the reality is I don't know, and it's kind of looking like it might not be. And that makes me sad, because I tried really hard. I really did. But when you don't have the skill set and you're kind of fumbling through as you know, playful out, you realize that there's so much that you don't know. And it just really showed me how much of a newbie I am in this realm. Like I may be able to financially coach people on looking at, you know, their income and their expenses and where the leaks are, and, you know, setting goals and planning for large purchases, and, you know, helping them to determine, like, do they really want to spend more money on travel, or do they really want to spend money on real estate? Like I might be able to help people make decisions like that. But in terms of like the process of like actually buying real estate, like there's just so much that I didn't know, that, you know, I had to like crash course learn in order to play this game. And, you know, I'm hopeful, but I also know that if I don't get this property, I'll be better prepared for the next property. I'll be better prepared with how to read the contracts, with how to ask better questions, with how to, you know, look for these things on the spot and try to get the answers on the spot in the first time showing up to the property, instead of going back a second or third time, especially when properties are a longer distance from where I live. So yeah, that's kind of like my personal experience on all this. And you might say, wow, well, how come you didn't do it sooner? Like I did do these things previously with, you know, a guy that I was engaged to. But I trusted the guy to read the details. I trusted the guy to handle the financial decisions. I trusted that his wisdom and knowledge was better than mine. I trusted that, you know, because he had more, quote, experience, that he would better protect my assets and my visions. But that wasn't really the case, sadly. So now I'm learning a whole new way of being. And my invitation to you is, maybe if you heard some of your story inside of my story, maybe you'd like to learn how to bypass some of these issues, how to save yourself some time from maybe looking a little too naive, and to position yourself to understand the language and the jargon and all that. So if you're interested to learn more about this or to be coached in the process, I am here, happy to assist you in the best way that I know how. And for the answers that I don't have answers to refer you to other people within my network that are wiser than me, that may have, particular information that's relevant to your particular situation that can help you navigate, solutions to those obstacles. So there it is. If you like this, press this thumbs up. I really appreciate it. And if you have any specific questions, put them down below. And if you're just interested in, life coaching, assessing where you are, where you want to go, whether it be with your career or your business or your health and fitness, hit me up and I would be happy to help you in any way that I can. And I hope you have a beautiful day. Enjoy the sunshine.